Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to part 7 of the Project Manager. I've got a brand new day view along with the previous month view, and we're going to be able to change that just on a single click. We also have now the ability to delete specific tasks just by selecting a X. We've got a lot to cover in this episode, so I can't wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me once again. We're on part 7 of the Project Manager, and this particular Project Manager is coming along quite nicely. We've added additional buttons. We have now a day view, a month view, and upcoming in the next training will be a year view that is not currently active. So on this brand new day view, we have the ability to do previous, next day, and of course today. So we've got a lot of that to show you, and also based on a suggestion, we now have the ability to delete a specific task just with click of an X, and it'll automatically be removed and refreshed. So we've got a ton to show you. Let's start with this particular ability to delete a task. Now, as you can see, we have the pop-up button X, the little X here. That's just a specific shape. It's a square shape, and then we have a little icon in it, and that has been grouped on a button. I've grouped both of those shapes along the picture of the X, which is here, along with the back of a blue button. So that's in a group, and that group is called the delete task button. And so we've got that ability. While I've got you here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you have not, just go ahead and click the subscription button below, and of course make sure that you select the notification icon bell. That's going to get you delivery of our videos each and every Tuesday, so you can remain constant and get these free amazing videos. And of course, if you do like these videos, I've got a few amazing promotions right now. We've got 100 workbooks available, all for just $37. I've got the link down below. And of course, if you want to excel your skills at dashboards, I've got an amazing 15-hour advanced dashboard masterclass with hundreds and hundreds of students who have now completed it and going on to their freelance careers with amazing success. So I'll include the links down below. I do appreciate that as well. All right, back to this week's training. So we've got this X, and of course, as we select a specific row, we do have the ability for this specific X to show up. So for example, if we were to select a specific job and we have the tax, and all of a sudden we just have this X. Now what I want is I want to have this X, this delete icon, to show up in the top row. Now what row is that? It's going to be an even row. It's going to be either row 4, row 6, row 8, or depending on the tax. But I also don't want this X to display unless we actually have a specific task that needs to be deleted, right? So otherwise we select anything else and it's gone. All right, there's a few things that we want to know for this particular training. We want it to show up only on a specific task. Now that specific task row is critical, right? We want it to show up on row 4. We want it to show up on row 6. So where do we define that task row? Well, that is located in 8 right here, 8. So you see when we select something else, it's gone. But we select a task 6 or 4, that B8 is the cell, changes as we do a selection. Now that's based on selection change, and we showed you that before, so we're well aware that the task row. But now what I want to do is I want to display an icon in a specific location. So I want to display it in column Q, and I want to display it on whatever row it is. So Q6 or Q4, and that is where I want to display it. And of course, if the user selects anything else other than that outside it, I want it removed. So how do we go ahead and do this? We can do that into the selection change part of the VBA, and let's go into the VBA and take a look at just how we did that. You've seen this before if you've seen my videos, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's relatively simple, but let's go into the Visual Basic. And remember, these are actions that are performed on the sheet, right? When a user is performing something on a sheet, like a selection change, that's when we want something to happen. Now, they're not editing it, they're not changing anything, they're actually just simply making a selection change. So selection change is where we want to put our focus on. And if we click on the Project Manager. This is the worksheet we're focused on, Sheet 1 Project Manager. And we're going to scroll down to Selection Change. Selection Change all the way down at the bottom. It's also here in the list. So if you don't have a selection change and you want to activate it, you just select it from here and it's going to automatically show and display. Now we have a lot of tasks. This is for the calendar. This displays the calendar, and so that codes for that. Now, if the user makes a specific selection change, from when? Well, from a specific range of cells. What is that range that we want to make that change? Well, that range is going to be located from K, and I think we also have that all the way to N, because if they select something like an O, we want that task completion to automatically, we don't want the X, so we can say in this case it's going to be K perhaps all the way through P. That's when we want it to change. So let's take a look at that. All the way from, let's take a look at the consent K through P. Here it is, on selection of a task. Now if the target row is greater than 1, I only want this to show up in target rows greater than 1. And why is that? Well, because in this particular instance we have something called target row, right? So we're going to say the target row minus 1, B8. So we're using the mod feature. So there are times when the target row is less than 1. Let me show you what I mean by that. If the user selects 7, row 7, I really want 6, the number 6, to show up here, right? So we're gonna, but if the user were to select the first row, I want to make sure there's no error, because that's gonna, 1 minus 1 is 0, and that's going to provide an error, right? And there's nothing happens when they select the first row, so we want to make sure to get out of that error. If I don't put that, we're going to see a bug. Let me show you that just so we can see what happens when that happens, just so you can understand that. I'm going to comment out this, and I'm going to comment out this, the end if and enter. So now we just have, and now we're going to select and create a bug. Now we're going to select that first row here, and it's going to create a bug. And what does it say? It says method range of object worksheet failed, debug. Why is that? Well, here we're saying and K, right? Well, we need to make sure K, there's a value in K. That's what I want to check on, right? K is here, right? So I need to make sure there's a value in K, right? Because if we're selecting anything below that, there's no value. We don't want anything to happen. We only want something to happen if we make a selection on a task with a value in K in the row, K4, K6, K8, or whatever, right? So we need to check for that. That's the second check, where there's two really checks. One, they've made a selection between K4 and P26. The second is K in the target row minus possibly 1 or possibly 0. If they've selected row 7, row 9, row 11, row 13, this is going to be 1. If they've selected an even row, 4, 6, 8, 10, this is going to be 0. So if they've selected an odd row such as row 1, now what if our target row is 1 and we're also subtracting 1, right? We're subtracting 1 because we've selected row 1. Remember, we've selected row 1 to get the bug. Okay, so if you see this bug, I want you to understand it, right? So if the target row is 1 and this is 1, the value, which is the remainder, which is 1 because it's an odd row, so 1 minus 1 is 0. So that means and K0. Now K0 is not a cell, so that's going to create a bug. That's why. That's why it's creating the bug, because so we need to make sure we run all this code only when the user selects the target row above 1. That is why we have added this and if in there. So that's just so you understand why we have a target row. That means the user we're only going to run this function if the user actually selects a row. Now, of course, we could actually make it probably greater than 3 because we're only focused on 4. But that'll create an issue if we don't put that in there. So that's why we've added this code in there. And now when we reset that and we select 1, nothing will happen because we have already done that. Okay, let me reset that code. Okay, so now when you select the top row, nothing happens. So we have that bug. All right, so continuing on, now we know why we're focused only on rows greater than row 1. Now if the user selects, we've gone over this, and we've gone over the tasks showing the task icons. Remember those. So that means if the user selects O through P, right? O through P, only those columns we're going to show the task icons. What are the task icons? Well, let me show you what that means. So that means O through P. Any one of these two columns, if they select either one of those two columns, I want to show this pop-up here, the task completion. So if they select P, I want to do the same thing here. so that we can see it. So I only want them to show this completion and the status when they select O through P. But if they select anything else, I want that to go away. I want it only, but I want the X to show regardless. Regardless, I want the X to show. So how do we do that? Well, that's based on this line of code here. So we're going to show the tasks button regardless. This line of code only happens if they select O through P, right? But this is regardless, right? Because this show task delete button. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that, right click, and I'm going to select the definition. It's off the screen, but I'm right clicking and definition. That's what I'm doing. It's going to locate our specific macro that we're looking for. And we can find that in the task show delete button. And that's located in a module called task macros. That's located here under task macros. Now we've created it. Now I've got a few others. Now I've added two to this module. I've called one called show delete button and one called delete task. We're going to go over both of these macros. Now the basic idea is very simple. I just want to display that group, the group that we've called delete task button. Remember, that is the X and it's the blue shape. I just want to display that, and I want to display it based on the task row. So the first thing we want to do is we need to make sure that if we're going to display it, we need to make sure that there's actual value in B8. If there's no value in B8, which is here, then there's nothing we can do. Like I've selected something else, there's nothing in B8, so we can't. This here is a date here. We're going to use this in the day view, just so you know. Okay, so if there's nothing in B8 here, there's nothing we can do. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that there actually is a task row. Then there's only a task row when we select a specific task. So that's the first thing we want to do, B8. If there's nothing in B8, we can exit out of the sub. So we're going to run through that check, and that's the first thing we're going to do. If sheet 1 B8 value equals empty, then exit the sub. There's nothing to do because there's no place we could put this. There's no specific row that we're going to put that icon, so we can exit the sub out. Okay, assuming that there is a value in B8, we can then assign that value to a variable that we've dimensioned here as long, called task row. And we're going to define task row is equal to sheet 1 B8 value. That's going to assign it. And now all we have to do is do two things. One, we have to place our icon where we want to, our group, and then we have to make it visible. So these two lines will place it. It's going to place it in column Q and based on whatever that task row is. And that's as far as the left and as far as the top. We don't need to increment. That's fine. We can place it right in the upper left-hand corner of, in this case, Q8, Q10, or whatever it is. And then, of course, the last thing is, we're going to make it visible. So we're going to make it visible. And that's all we've done. So that's a very, very simple. Now, if we look back on here, back into the project manager, we have an else, right? If the user selects anything outside of this, and of course K is not the value, then what do I want to do? I want to hide it. So that I want to hide the task status group in case that's visible, and I also want to hide the delete task button so that it's not visible. We only want that visible when the user can actually make some sort of a delete, right? When they're clicking on here, they can make that delete. But what if they select outside? If they select anything else, we don't want it to display. So selecting outside of this particular range is going to hide it. It's going to hide both the task icon group, and remember, if you remember correctly, you'll see from the previous training that this specific group is called the task status group. So you see we have both the X and the group, but when we select outside of that, or we select a task where there's no value, both of them are going to hide. And so we can do that. That's part of the else. And that's part of the else right here. So else, that means there's something they have selected outside, shapes, task group, visible equals false, and of course, delete task button equals false. And I also want to clear any possible cell value, any possible selected row in B8, and I want to clear that out. So that's how we get that to display. Now, how do we get it to delete? Okay, the first thing we want to do is we need to make sure that there's an actual row to delete. And if you remember correctly, our project tasks are all located in this table right here. These are all of our project tasks. This is the database where all the information is stored. And so this is the line. I need to know what row that we're going to be deleting. That's critical. If I don't have a row here, then there's nothing to delete. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have a row. Now, of course, if you remember correctly, our rows are stored here. Right now they're hidden, but let's change the font color and display them. Right now it's blue. We're going to change it to automatic, and that's going to put them in black. So this specific 25, let's select out of it, this 25 and this 30 denote the row numbers of those tasks. So if we see inspection on row 25 and we go to row 25 of our inspection, we will see that that task is here. So if we're going to delete that, I've got to know that we're going to be deleting row 25. So that's critical. That information is brought over when we load the tasks. If you remember in the previous training, if not, it's no problem. So that information is brought over. So when we need to do two things, I need to make sure that the user actually wants to delete it with a confirmation, and I also want to make sure that they have a row number here. So that's the first part of the macro. So when we delete it and we click delete and click yes, we want that to be deleted. And I've also got a fade out message here, which I'm going to show you how we did if you don't know. So that's how we delete the task, and I should probably remove this X as well. In fact, let's go ahead and hide that delete task button. We're going to copy that, and we want, after we delete it, we want to hide it, right? That's very important. So let me go ahead and add that in, delete task icon. So the last thing we have the deleted message, but before that, let's go ahead and click on dot shapes, and we are going to delete dot visible equals MSO false. So we want to hide that specific delete once we've deleted the task. So just with that line of code. All right, so we've got that covered because that's kind of important. I don't want that X to show up after we've deleted something. All right, let's continue on. Let's load another one with a lot of tasks here. Okay, there we go. This one's got a lot of tasks. And let's say we're going to delete this one. Let's double check to make sure our code worked. Do you want to delete it? Yes. And it's been deleted, and now you see the X is gone. That's really the effect that I want to have. Okay, so we see how that, let's see how that works. So the first thing we want to do is we need to make sure that, one, we need to make sure that there's actual task row here, right, in B8. Second, we also need to make sure that in Q and row 8, that there's actually a value here. So there's two checks we're going to run. One, there's a value in B8, and two, that there's a value in Q and whatever that row is. So for example, this would be, if we selected a specific, it would be Q6. We need to make sure that there's a value in Q6. Now you see the X is hiding it, but we can move that over. We'll see that it's 20. Right? So we need to make sure that there's a value in that. So that's very important. So we're going to run, that's the first thing we're going to do in our delete task macro. And of course, if we right click here, in fact we select on an individual shape within that group, and we right click, we will see that that specific macro has been assigned. If we click assign macro, we see the macro is called task delete task. That's the macro that we're going to be focused on, and that's the macro that I've assigned to that button. So we go back into the VBA. First thing we're going to do is we need to know what row the user has selected. We're going to dimension that as select row as long. And of course, the actual row that we're going to be deleting, the task row, we need to know that. We're going to dimension both of those variables. We're going to be focused primarily on sheet 1. So we're going to use if with sheet 1. Let's tab that over so we can get that. The first thing we want to do is we want to make sure there's a confirmation. So we're going to give a message box asking the user if they're sure that they want to delete this task. And we can do this through if the message box and the actual message, are you sure you want to delete this task? And this type of the buttons that are going to show up is going to be called VB yes or no. Now, of course, if you're typing that, you'll see that we have lots of different options. We have VB critical, VB yes, VB no, VB cancel. So we have got lots of options, okay? So we're choosing yes and no, which is down here, VB yes and no. And then, of course, the title of that pop-up is called delete task. We want the title of that to delete. And of course, if all of this, if this equals VB no, if the user has said no, then just exit the sub. We don't need to continue on if the user doesn't want to. Now, how does that work? All we need to do is we just select on the X here, click OK, and we see that we have a title called delete task here. We have the text, are you sure you want to delete this task? And of course, if we say no, it's just going to exit out and nothing will happen. It won't get deleted. Okay, so we've got that part, and now we're ready. Now we're going to run our two checks. If VA, I guess we could put these first, of course, as well. If range B8 equals empty, remember, we need to know what row the user has selected, and that's stored in B8. So of course, if that is empty, there's nothing we can do. We can just exit out of the sub. And then of course we're going to dimension that as the selected row. That is the row that the user has selected in order to be deleted, the selected task row. And we're going to define that into B8. So now we've got that assigned. Now we need to run one more check. If column Q in the select row, if that value is empty, then we also need to exit sub, because that means there's no specific task row in the task database that can be deleted. So of course we are going to exit out of that at that point. All right, next thing, we can run the macro. It's called stop calculation. And of course this macro, if you haven't seen it, is right here into the code reset max. And all this stop calculation does is it puts enabling events as false, calculations to manual, and screen updating to false. And of course, when we have stop calculation, we need to make sure that before the end of the macro, we have reset the calculation, which of course enables events, turns calculations to automatic, and screen updating to true. So that's very important. And the reason we do that is so that the code runs a lot faster. All right, so now we're going to assign the task row. We know that there's a value in Q in the select row, so we can assign that to the task row. Next up, we're ready to delete. Sheet 7 is our project tasks, and we can delete that specific row with this line of code, task row and the colon and task row, entire row delete. All right, next up, now that we've deleted it, I want to reload those tasks because I don't want that specific task to show up anymore. So we're going to reload them, and what that's going to do is run a macro to reload all these tasks. So for example, if I delete bug checks and I click yes, I want to reload it so that bug checks is gone. So we do that right here. So now it's gone. So we want to run that macro to reload. We've been over that macro before, but I'll go over it real quick with you. So what we're going to do is we're going to project load task, and all that does is it loads the task. So when we have the project macros here and we scroll down here, we have project load tasks right here, and all that does is it clears out all the tasks, runs another advanced filter, and brings in all of the updated tasks from sheet 7 and then brings them back in. Of course, with that one deleted, it's no longer going to be available, so it's going to not show up anymore. So that's why we load. We also want to load the project schedule, right? If I delete a specific task, I want to run the macro that reloads this schedule. Okay, if we take a look at this specific project here called test description, right? This particular project here, I've got 4 different tasks. If I delete one, I want to reload this specific project, the scheduler, so that we don't. Let's move this over here. Put it over here. Okay, so I want to reload. I don't want to include this task. So if I take this specific task and I delete it, then I want to make sure that it doesn't show up on the schedule. So it's gone from the schedule as well. So we want to update the schedule, and we can do that through that line of code. We've been over that macro before, but I also want to reload the schedule so that the tasks that was just removed are gone. All right, next up, we're going to reset the calculation. I've done that before. And of course, the shapes delete task button, I want to hide that, right? Because we're no longer deleting tasks, we just added that up. And of course, I want to create a fade out message, and you saw that message briefly, and what that does is it just shows up a message. Let's take a look at that. We may add more later, so I've created a module called fade out messages. You may have seen this before. If it is, it'll be real quick. And all that does is create a message. When we run that macro, let's take a look here and run that macro, and you'll see it just says task deleted. Let me show you that one. When I click in there and I click fade out, it says task deleted, and that's kind of a nice feature because we have the ability to alert the user without them having to press OK, which can be a little annoying. I do have an entire training on the fade out messages, so if you like, just go ahead and click on the search bar in your YouTube and click fade out messages, and of course you can find all the details there, and of course you can download that workbook for free, just like you can download this workbook for free in the links below. All right, so basically all this does is it takes a specific shape and it makes it visible, and then after that it runs through a loop, and based on that loop, the transparency of that will change. So it starts to become with full transparency, and then it goes to almost zero transparency, and then it makes it invisible. So all that is just a loop. And let me run that again so you can see that. It starts out with full transparency, it goes to zero, and then it hides it. That's a really great tool that we can use to alert the user without involving the user. All right, so we've got that. We've got the fade out messages. We've covered our task macros. We've covered both the show delete button and delete tasks, so we now have that feature. In the tasks, I've already gone over with you everything else. And let's move on to the day view here. And the day view is not completely set. I've got a lot of more ideas what I want. Right now we're just showing the day view, and it's based on the previous date. Let me hide these tasks temporarily so we can see that. Okay, so we've got the ability to do previous day and next day, and it'll show all the tasks. There's a lot more I want to this. Right now we're just showing all of the tasks that are scheduled on that day. There's a lot I want to do. I think I want to change the conditional formatting, add more. I want to be able to select on a different project and have that project show up here. That's really important. It's just not done yet because there's a lot to be done on that, and there's a lot of training for you to go over. So we're going to probably get to that. I really want to be able to select, just like we do on the month view, select on a project and have that project. It's relatively easy. We're just going to bring over the project row and have it load up, but I'll bring that to you probably next time. And so what we're going to be doing is, I also want to select it, and I want to know which one we selected. So we have a lot more to do, but basically all I have done here is any specific task that is located in a job that is located in this date, January 2nd, I want to display here. That's any task that is not involved in with it, whether it's got a beginning date that is within that or an ending date or anything in between. I want it to show up here for this. So for example, Wednesday, and when we click next day, I want it to be updated accordingly. And so we can see as we go through it, we have different tasks starting. So it's a great way. Let's increase this column a little bit. There we go. So that's what I want to happen. So and of course today there's going to be nothing on. It's going to be Sunday, June 16th. And I also need the ability to have a little pop-up calendar here, because right now there's no way to change this date to a specific date. I really, except going through B8. So I really B9. So I'm going to have a little pop-up calendar so that you can select a specific date. I think that's really important. We need to be able to select, and that's easy. I can just add a pop-up calendar like this on click, and then just click it. So that's going to be really easy to do. I just haven't done it yet because there's a lot to get done here. And of course I'm working for you, and really most importantly it's based on your ideas. Let's go ahead and change this date to 1 January, which is where most of my data is located, here in January. And we can do previous dates, so we can start showing some specific tasks on these days. All right, I think we are covering that. So how do we do this? We've got a lot of different features that we're covering in here. And basically the idea is I want to run through the projects, and I've created an additional, we can probably get rid of that. We don't need that. So what I want to do is I want to look through all of the projects, and any project that lands on this specific date right here, Thursday, Tuesday, January, any project that is within that date or involves that date, I want it to show up here. And pretty much the same thing for tasks. Any task that involves that date, whether that means it starts on or before, and of course if it ends on or after, I want it to show up in that list right there. And I also wanted to show how much it's completed. So that's really important. And also we have the estimated days and the actual days. We can do a lot with this with conditional formatting. For example, if it goes over the actual days, we can change the conditional formatting. If it's under the actual days of the estimated days, we can do that. So there's a lot we can do with conditional formatting so that we know if our tasks are under or over, so that's really going to help us, because we have the estimated number of days that a specific task is going to take us, and we also have the actual days based on both the start date and the completion date. Now the estimated end date, that's the end date that we think that task is going to end, but the completed date is the actual date in which task ends. So now that we have all this data, we can do a lot with it so that we know if that project's on time, if it's late, or if it's under budget in time. So there's a lot we can do with that. And of course I'm really relying on your ideas. Some of the task managers that I've seen are just unbelievable. I think they're much better than this one. This one's okay, it's got some nice VBA features, but there are really professional ones that are sold on the market that much better than this. But this kind of gives you a new angle and different, but there's some exceptional task managers or Gantt charts that they display, and this one's just kind of going to show you some different features. This one's heavy on VBA because we can do a lot within a short area. We can create unlimited projects, unlimited tasks. So in that sense, this is kind of a nice way to do it. Others don't have that ability, but they look probably a little bit better. All right, continuing on. So how do we get this information display? The first thing we have is this is a text box, Now this text box is based on a specific cell, and that cell is B9. So whatever happens in B9 is going to change. So if we go previous day, B9 is going to show previous day. So when we look over here and we expand this because it's a long date format, we'll see it's Monday, January 7th. And that day is based, it's just a date here, and it's got a format. So whatever format we change here is going to change in this day. Our day view is all based on this B9, all based on this B9. So when we want to run filters based on this, we're going to use B9. So for example, in the project list, I want to create a brand new. Now I have month view, right? I've created different criteria for day view now, just so we can keep them separate. So what's our criteria? What I want to do is use a formula. And remember, in the early videos over a year ago, we were putting these dates in via VBA. In other words, just placing them. But that works sometimes, but not always when you have different date formats. So be very aware of this. I want to see you guys using formulas here, okay? Because why? Because that's going to, regardless of the date, so regardless of your format, regardless of your country or regional settings, this advanced filter is going to work just great. So that's why we're using formulas now, because it's really helped based on your feedback, based on the comments. You're telling me that these formulas based on all your country settings, because these workbooks do go global. Hundreds of countries, over 100 or 200 countries have downloaded these workbooks, so there's different date formats. So this type of formula will work regardless of your regional settings. All right, so what I want to do is I want a start date that is less than or equal to B9. Remember, that's our date. I also want an end date that is greater than or equal to that date too. So if I have that, if the end date of a specific task is greater than or equal to, and remember, and they're on the same row, and a start date is less than or equal, in that case, I want you to include that, put those results right here, right here. So how do we do that? We do that through advanced filter. And then what I want to do is I want to take all this information starting at project name. Eventually we're going to put in project numbers, and eventually I think we're going to need row here if we're going to make changes, but we'll add that in. Row meaning the row of the database, which would be right here. I'm going to add that. That'll row. Well, I'll show you that next time because that's going to allow us to make changes. Oh, that's another thing. Also, it might be nice, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this. If we make a change here, we can update the database. But if we select it, we can also change it here. So it's kind of double. It may just show you two different ways, but you may not want to incorporate both ways. But basically, two different ways to save it to the actual database might be helpful. All right, back into the project list. So what I want to do is I want to take this data, we're back into day view here. Take this information here, and then I want to bring it over line by line, row, not as a group, because under each one is we're going to put the task. So row by row by row, we're going to take it and bring it here. So I want this project, this project, this project. So I want them all to be displayed here. And if they have any task, I want to display it. All right, so let's pull. There we go. So I want this project to show up, this project to show up, this project. These projects don't have any tasks, but if they do, they're going to show up underneath and just to the left. We need to make that a little bit more clear. I need to add some conditional formatting, so your ideas were going to be helpful. I need to make it so that the projects and the tasks are very clear. Right now, it's not so clear. These are projects, these are tasks. So we're gonna do some things to improve that as we move forward. I want to differentiate the projects from the task a little bit more clear. So we need to do that. All right. So each project's going to go here, 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 here. So we're going to loop through the projects. So I'm going to go from this project to this project to this project. And for each project, what I want to do is I want to find out if there's any tasks for that specific project. Now, how do we do that? Well, I'm going to take the project number and I'm going to bring it into our project tasks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add that into its own criteria right here. And of course, I'm going to put that. And also, I want to know if there's tasks that involve that. I don't want to know all the tasks, right? I only want to know tasks that are focused on that specific day, right? Only tasks that involve that specific, because it's a day view. We're only focused on tasks for that day. If a task happened last month and got completed, I'm not going to be concerned about that. I only want to know all the tasks associated with that specific day. And in this case, we're going to use those same formulas, B9. We also want to know any tasks that, of course, starting less than or equal to the start date. And of course, any tasks that have an estimated end date that's greater than or equal to also the date that's associated in B9. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to determine all the tasks that are in the results. We're going to determine all the tasks. Then what I'm going to do is once those results are in, I want to bring this task information and I want to put it right under the specific project. So in this one, test theme right here, I want to bring it right here. So I want to place that task information right below the project, and of course any tasks that are associated. So as we run through it, we can see that this particular project has 2 tasks associated with this, because this one starts on the 2nd and ends on the 4th, so it's involving the 4th, and this one starts on the 3rd and ends on the 5th. So if we move down, we're going to see also on January 3rd these 2 tasks are involved in this project on within that January 3rd date. So I want those 2 to be displayed. So we're going to run through each project. We're going to check for any tasks on that date, and then we're going to bring those tasks over, and that's primarily it. So let's go ahead and go through the VBA and to see just how we did that. We're going to focus on the project manager, and we're going to focus on the project list first, and of course this criteria. Now let's go back into the VBA and take a look at the schedule day view here. And we're going to call this day view refresh because that's where we want the projects to list. Day view refresh. This is the macro that we're going to be going over. And of course, we have a few more. We have previous day, we have next day, and we have today. We also have these macros too, but we'll go over the refresh, which is the main macro. And it's called day view refresh. And how do we get that? Well, I've determine the scheduling row. I need to keep track of what row we're on. We're going to be looping through all the rows in the schedule, right? So if we're going to be starting at, of course, row 4, and we're going to be going all the way down as many as we need to. So we need to focus on that. We need to keep track of what row we're on as we move down. So we need to define that as schedule row. Also, I need to know the last project row. We're going to be running an advanced filter, so I need to know what the last project row is. Same thing for tasks. If we're going to run through and we're going to run an advanced filter on tasks, I need to know what the last row is of each of those. So we need to determine that, and we need to determine, for example, the last project task row currently is 28, while the last project row is, let's take a look here, in this case is 13, right? So we need to know those rows, and I'm going to dimension those, and then of course we're going to use X and LUP to determine which of those last rows. I also need to know the last project results row and the last task results row. When we get our results, we need to know the last row so that we can loop. For example, we've added our criteria in here, and then we're going to get our results here. I need to know what is the last row. In this case, it's 7 because we're going to loop through them. So I need to know the first row is always going to be 4, and the last row in this case is 7. So we need to know that. And of course, the same thing for tasks. I need to know the last row there. In this case, it's 3. All right, so we've determined that. And of course, the project row, we need to know which row we're on the project. And the task row, because we're going to loop through the results, so we need to determine both of those. The schedule row is going to start out at 4 because that's the first available slot that we have on our project manager. 4 is the first row. We're going to loop down, right? So we want to make sure we've set 4. Of course, we also want to clear any specific projects and tasks that are currently here so that we can load some new ones. So we're going to do that with this line of code here. We're going to stop the calculation. That's going to speed things up. And of course, we're primarily focused on with sheet 1, so we're going to focus on that. That's where all of the work is going to be done mostly. So of course, we're going to clear out the existing day view, just as I had said. HA4 through HL, we're going to clear that out. Why do we do that? Because we're going to be loading new ones. So HA4 all the way through HL, we need to delete that and clear that out. Of course, we've got conditional formatting that allows us to automatically update it. So as soon as we update it, that conditional formatting is going to use. Hopefully, if we have time, we're going to go over that conditional formatting today. If not, we're going to get to it next time. I'll make sure you get all the training you need right here in Excel for freelancers. All right, so continuing on in our macro, we're going to clear that out so we can load some new data. We also want to clear out any results in sheet 2 or sheet 7. That's our project. So that means when we go into our project list, we have our results here. Maybe there's some previous results, so I want to clear that out. So we're going to clear out AT4 all the way through ABC on our projects just so we can get ready. And these are calculated formulas. We're going to go over that soon. All right, so I want to clear that out, and I also want to do the same thing for project tasks. Any results, previous results, we want to clear that out. So sheet 7, AN3, all the way to AT. We want to delete that, clear all that information out so that we can get the new results in there. We can do that with just 2 lines of code. Sheet 2, range AT, this is our project list. AT4 through BC999, going to clear any remaining projects out. And then, of course, we can then do the same thing for tasks. Sheet 7 is where our tasks are located. We're going to clear out any results there. Next up, we need to determine the last project row because we're going to run an advanced filter as we do so often, almost in every training. And we need to know the last row and run that. Sheet 2 is our projects. So A is the first column. That's where our data table is located. And that, of course, is our project numbers. So we're going to just get the last row. I need to know the last row. That's very important so we can take all that data, all of the data, and run it through an advanced filter. And of course, if the last project row is less than 4, then go to no project data. Why do we do this? I do this because when you get this schedule, you may want to add your own data. And what you're going to do is you're going to take all of this data and probably delete it, right? But if I have no data and we try to run it through an advanced filter with no data, it's going to create a bug. So if for some reason the last row is less than 3, then just exit out of it. There is no data. There's nothing else we can do. And also, so keep that in mind. If you are running a workbook and you're running into an error like that, make sure that we're not running through any advanced filters if you actually have no data. So that's very important. So we need to assign that last row, and then we need to check to make sure that the last row is not less than the data. Once we have gone this, and of course it says go to no project data, what that's going to do is going to skip all this, go down here, right, reset the calculation. That's very critical because we've already stopped the calculation. So we need to reset the calculation and then exit out of the sub. We skip everything if there is no data. All right, next up, we're ready to run our advanced filter. Sheet 2, that's our projects. A3, that's our first header. That includes our first column and our header there, right? We must include the header through M, which is the last column, and the last project row. That's going to run our advanced filter through all of the projects. We want to copy that information to a new area of the worksheet, but I want to set some criteria. And what are those criteria? That's going to be in sheet 2, AP3 through AQ4, and it must include the headers and the values, AP3 through AQ4. What is that? Well, if you look at our project, and we have our project list here, and we have our day view, AP3 through AQ4. I want to include it. This is the criteria. This is the criteria for our advanced filter, so we need to include that to make sure that we have it. And the next part of our advanced filter, we're going to run the results, AT3, all the way through BA. These are added on. And BA, we're going to run the results right here. So that's how we do in our advanced filter. So if we copy to the range AT through BA3 and the unique equals false, we can have duplicate records. That would be okay for now. All right, moving on. Now that we have our advanced filter, we need to run a check. I need to make sure if the results, right? We're going to first hit the results row, the last results row. We're going to define that in a variable. In this case, it's 7. But of course, if that is less than 4, then we can skip everything and go to no data. And that means there's no data for this date. So we want to skip doing anything else if the last row is less than 4. We can do that with just 2 lines of code. The first thing we want to do is set the last project results row here to sheet 2 AT. Remember, AT is the first column of variables right here. AT, that's our project number. So it's going to find it, in this case it's 7. It's going to find that last row, and then it's going to run a check using end XL up row. That's going to get us our last row. Then that check, if the last project results row is less than 4, then go to no project data. No project data. Again, that's going to skip everything and go right to here. All right, now assuming that there is data, we can then copy that information. Now what I want to do is I want to actually copy the formulas, right? There's some formulas there. What are those formulas for? Well, I want to determine the estimated days and the actual days. Now the estimated days is simply the end date minus the start date. This is your estimated end date, and minus, so in this case it would be 6. But what if then we have the completed on date. This is the date that the user marked as completed for this specific project. What is that? If we look here, we have completed on date here, 1/30, right? And of course our start date is simply our start date plus the number of days plus the duration, right? So 1 week would be 7 days. That is our specific end date, but our completed on date is 1/30. So we need to take all of that information so that we can determine both our start date, our actual days, and our end days, estimated days. So into the project list, we have estimated days, and that's simply AX4 minus AW4. AX4 minus AW4. The next we have the completed on date. So our start date, right, our completed on date minus the start date would be the actual days. So those are just two formulas. Now, of course, I don't want formulas here all the way down. I only want formulas where they're necessary. And of course, in this one doesn't have a completed date. So we should probably run a check making sure that this is valid. But if we put a date in here, so I'll update this formula to make sure that there's actually a date on that. So we can do something like, in this case, if, right, what is it? The completed on, if AY2, right, does not equal empty, then we can AY2 minus A1. And what that's going to do is going to make sure that the completed on actually has a value. So now when you copy that information over, paste in the formulas, now we've got a blank where we need to have a blank, and that's good. All right, so that's what we're going to do in VBA code. We're going to copy BB2 through BC2 and then paste it down based until the last row. And that is called formulas on demand, so that we only have the formulas where we need them and calculate them when we need them. Otherwise, we'd have to copy them all down for every possible row, and that creates slower workbooks. So we don't want that. So that's what we're going to do in the code. So if we look back in the code now, what we have is we have sheet 2 BB2 through BC2. We're going to copy those formulas, and then I'm going to paste them down, paste special, paste formulas. I'm going to start out at BB4 and paste all the way until the last project row. That's going to get us our calculations for both estimated number of days and actual number of days. And then we can cancel out of the copy mode, cut copy mode equals false, and what that's going to do is remove the dancing ants that you see here once we copy them. Once we copy, right, and then we paste here, paste formulas, we still have those dancing ants. So we want to get rid of that, so just by cut copy mode false is going to remove it. So that's what we do in the code to get rid of that. All right, next we're ready to run a loop. What do I want to do? I want to run a loop starting here, going all the way to the last row here. And I want to run that loop, and so I want to, for each project, I want to put it in here. So after I put a project in this first spot here, I want to check for any possible tasks. So we're going to do that. So then what I want to do is I want to take that project number and I want to place it right here into AJ3. These dates are already going to be here because they're based on a formula. So then I want to run an advanced formula using the criteria here and determine if there are any tasks within those days, and if so, place it right here. That's what we're going to do right in the code. So the first thing we're going to do is start our loop. Project row equals 4 to the last project results row. Next up, range HA value. We're going to place the project name. I want to place that project name in sheet 1. What is that? I want to take the project name right here into project lists right here, AU, and I want to place it right here into HA. So HA and the project, the schedule row, HA and whatever schedule row we're on, equals AU and whatever row, project row we're on here. So that's all I'm going to do is place it. Then what we want to do is place the rest of the information. So they're going to do that in 2 different lines. And why are we doing that? Because this is skipped, right? And this is skipped. So we want to skip those, and we're going to start a next one here. So we're going to do that in 2 different steps. The first step is placing the project name. HA and the schedule row equals sheet 2 AU and the project row. That's going to place the project name right on our list. All right, the next thing up, we want to do the remaining details. And of course, we're starting that in HE through HL of the schedule row. HE equals what? Equals sheet 2 AV through BC. Let me show you what that is. So starting in HE here, right, all we're doing is taking this information right here from HE all the way through HL equals what? Equals right here, AV all the way through BC, AV through all the way through BC. We're going to bring that in and bring it over. So that's what we're going to be doing right here under the project manager. and I need to update the font here. This actually should be, so we're going to focus on that in the next. This should show the status, of course, for projects will show as a text, but I need to update the font to show Wingdings, right? So if we go into, right, the same thing, because if we look at this font right here, that is, when we go into the home, we'll see that font is Wingdings 2. So I need to do the same thing for here. I need to add this to Wingdings 2, but not all of them. So we need to do that through VBA. So when I update this and I change this to Wingdings 2, you'll see that that changes properly. So that's what I want to show up. We're going to use that in the next training, but I want to do that through VBA because it's all variable. So we need to change it through VBA and then change it back to Arial. So that's just a too few lines of code. We'll get to that in the next. So that's important. We need to do that as well. All right, so continuing on, so I want to place that data right here, and then once it's done, I want to check for any tasks. For example, when we add this project here, the bugs, we know that there's 2 tasks associated with that. So we're going to continue on with our VBA doing that. So once we do that, once we place all the job information, we're going to increase the schedule row by 1, and then what we're going to do is we're going to load any tasks that are associated with that specific project. So the first thing we want to do is take the project number and put it in the project in the criteria. What is that? If we look at that, what I want to do is we know that we have the project number right here. I want to take this project number and I want to put it right here. Project number here. Then I'm going to run then I'm ready to run the advanced filter. So with that line of code, we just do that. Sheet 7 AJ3 equals AT and the project row. That's just going to move the project number right over to AJ3. All right, continuing on, the last task row. Now we're ready to run our advanced filter on our tasks. The first thing we need to do is determine the last task row. So we can do that using endLF. That's of course sheet 7. And of course we do need to run a check to make sure if the user has cleared out all the tasks or if they have no tasks. We need to skip running an advanced filter, so we can do that if the last task row is less than 3, then skip it and go right to here, no tasks. We need to make sure that we don't go outside of this loop because we still need to go, perhaps the next project may have, tasks or something like that. So we do that. We could probably skip all of that too, but it's okay because we do want to list all the projects. We want to list all the projects. Even if you don't use tasks, we still want to list all the projects. So that's very important. All right, now we're ready to run our advanced filter. Sheet 7, A2, including the header row, M is the last column. To the last task row, we're going to run our advanced filter. We're going to copy that information over. We're going to use criteria. I know moving quick, but we've gone over advanced filters so many times. Our criteria is, of course, that project number and the dates AJ2 through AL3. AJ2 through AL3, including the headers. Remember, we want the results to show up right here, all the way over on here through AN2 through AZ. So that's where our results are going to show up, right over here, AN2 through AZ2, and the unique we could put probably false here. False or true. I just want them all to show up regardless. All right, next up we need to determine the last results row. Now that we have our results, I need to know the last row. Because if there are no results, there's nothing to bring over. There's nothing to bring over here if there are no results. So to do that, we can determine the last row. In this case, the last row is 3. So we can do that with this line of code right here. If the last task, first we're going to determine the last task results row. In sheet 7, AO is going to determine the last row. Of course, if it's less than 3, then go to no tasks. Next up, now assuming that there is data, there is tasks that need to be brought over into the project manager, we are ready to bring that information over. So we're going to do that with just a few lines of code, actually just one line of code here. HB in the schedule row and HL plus the last task row. Why do we need to do that? Let me show you real quick. I know, all right, we're determining our project row. I want HB, right, are going to be here. Let's take a look here. Here's our first task. I want this first task to show up in HB, and I want to bring all this information, take all this task information, bring it from right here, starting here, AO, all the way. I just want to take this information, all this data, and bring it right here into this line, right? And then move on to the next task. But I can do that with all the tasks. So I know, let's say if this row is 8, if our last row, for example, if our last row is 3, I know we just have one row. So 3 minus 2 is just 1. So, but if I want to add 1, I know that if our project is 8, if our schedule row is 8 and I want to add 1, I just move it to 9. So we can do that with this line of code. HB in the schedule row through HL in the schedule row, whatever the schedule row, plus what are we adding up? The last task results row minus 3. That's going to give us 1 or none. This is going to, if there's just one line, if it's just one line, in this case, we want it to be 0. We want this value to be 0 so that we don't increase if it's 1. Here's what I mean. This is a perfect example. If we look in the project task, we have just one result. So when we subtract 3 minus 3, we know the last row is 3, but if we subtract 3, we're going to get 0. If we add 0 to whatever current, for example, our current row, let's say in this case it's 6, right? Our schedule row is 6. We add 0, it's going to be 6 through 6, right? It's not going to add any rows, and that's what I want. So if we have one row, we add 0. If we have 2 rows, we add 1, and so on and so forth. So that's why we subtract 3. So this value on this schedule is just going to bring over all of the data. All the data, in this case, is just one row. AO3 through AY and the last task results. So it's just going to bring all of that data over right from here. AO, starting with the task name, to AZ, bringing all that data into the project. Now we're ready to move on to the next verse. So it's going to loop through the project, and then it's going to go, now we're ready. We're going to increase the schedule row, but how many increases are we going to schedule? We need to increase it. Well, basically, I want to increase it by the number of tasks that we just added. We just added one task, so the last row was 3. So if this 3 minus 2 equals 1, that means we're going to increase the schedule row just by 1, and that's where we're going to have the project row. So when we go to the next project row, it's going to increase that schedule right here. For example, we added 1, our schedule row was 6. Now we added one task, so it's going to go from 6 to 7. Now we're ready to add the next project in row 7 as it loops through all the projects. So then it's going to go through the next project and the next project and the next project. Each one, it's going to be adding the project number here using the same dates and determining all the tasks that apply to those conditions. And then it's going to add those tasks right here. All right, great. So now that's how we run through the loop. And so all we do is just reset the calculations, and that's it. That is all we have to do. So for example, if we have previous, next day, and today, it's very, very simple. All I need to do is change the value in B9. Of course, B9, of course, is our date. It is the date that everything is tied to in this day view. We look at B9 here, it's here, right here. That is the date that it's tied to. So all we need to do is increase or decrease this date and then rerun the macro, rerun that macro that updates everything in this table. So all we need to do is just two things. One, update the date, and 2, refresh the data. So that's exactly how we're doing it. So for example, when we use previous day, all I need to do is update the B9 with 1 less than the current value and run the macro. The next day is pretty much the same thing, except we're adding a value, adding 1, which is increase the date, just 1, and then refreshing. And of course, today, all we're doing is making it equal to the current date, B9, and then again, running that same macro that refreshes all of the data. So that's how we do that. Now that's how we get it there. Now we have a few more. We've got conditional formatting. I'll show you a little bit of the conditional formatting so you can see we have completion percentage, and all this is the data bar. So when we go into conditional formatting and we manage the rules, we're going to see several conditional formats. If we click on the data bar, it's just a very simple solid fill color blue, and it's of course based on information. Actually, this one's automatic, but you could also base it on percentages, but this one's automatic. It understands that 100% is going to be full, 50% is going to be half. So it's so if we were to change this value to 20%, we'll see that that data bar changes to 20%. So that's a very basic data bar. Now also we have some additional conditional formatting that allows us to display rows or hide rows based on the information. Let's take a look at some of that. Clicking on Manage Rules, we have a few different rules. We just went over the data bar. And now I also want to color some specific cells based on. So for example, if you'll see the projects have a little bit, the tasks have a little bit of a darker blue. I should change that. It's really hard to see. It's a little bit too light of a blue. So let's go ahead and update that. HB5, here we go. HB5 does not equal blank, then I want to color it. So if we format this, we look at the fill and we add a little bit of a darker color into this and click OK, and now we will see that now all of our tasks are a little bit darker, and I think that's a little bit better. The tasks are darker, so we can see clearly which ones are those tasks. And how do we do that? Back into the conditional formatting, and we click on this. And basically what we're doing is saying if HB5, actually this could be, the first task of course is not going to be on row 4 because the first project would be there. So we can start out on 5, and we're basically saying if it's blank, all of the tasks use HB, all the tasks use HB where the task name goes. All of the projects use HA, so that we can use that as a rule. If HB5 does not equal blank, then color it. And of course, because there is no absolute $sign below 5, it is going to apply to every single row as long as our applies to starts at 5 as well. Our applies to starts at 5 and goes all the way through HL, and that's going to color all those rows dark blue, a medium blue color. So that's how we do that. All right, moving on, let's take a look. I also wanted to do some more. I also wanted to have like a dotted line between the projects. So between the differentiate between specific tasks. So if we have multiple tasks, I wanted a little bit of a dotted line, a little bit of differentiation. It's kind of hard to see, so we'll update that with a little bit different rule. But I do that right here. And here, if we take a look at this edit rule, we see this is based on 2 different conditions. In this case, if HA4 equals empty and HB4 do not equal empty, in that case we have a tasks, right? There's no project because HA4, HA is where our projects are located, HB is where our tasks. So if we have one that's blank and one that's not, that means we have a task. And if we format this and we click on the border, we'll see that it's got this dotted line. We can actually change it to a different color line here and go here, and we can change the line and we can update this color as well and click OK. And now you'll see that a change now has taken effect. Now we've got this a little bit different type of a dotted line, and that's only for instances in which this is differently a task. So it's separated by, this is how we separate tasks here. So we've got additional conditional formatting, and let's take a look at one more before we end this training. Conditional formatting, manage rules. We also have additional here down all the way down here. And let's take a look at this. In this case, if HA4 does not equal a value and H3 equals a value, what do I want to do? That means the top one and the bottom one are equal. So that means I want to place a border around this all the way on the left and the right and up except for the top. So when we click on the format, I want to place these bottom, the left and the right borders and leave the top the way it is. And what is that case? In that case, that is for a project. So if you see we have a project here, I want that to appear here in the projects. That's how we get this border. And I'll probably do some updates on these borders and update the conditional formatting, probably based on your ideas. So when you have ideas of how we can increase the look of this, let me know in the comments below. I always appreciate your comments. I always appreciate your likes and your shares. So that's a great way to keep this content for free. So I really appreciate it. And of course, if you do get a chance, go ahead and check out the Dashboard Masterclass. We also have an amazing resource guide with 1,000 Excel resources. Got tons of 100 PDF downloads along with 100 free class listings and 100 paid ones. So it's a fantastic resource guide to get you the best in Excel. And of course, those 100 workbooks for just $37. Those keep this training free each and every week. So I do appreciate all your support. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next week with part 8. Thanks again.